The voices of accountability. This beacon encourages every Bajan to speak up and take responsibility when they see something going wrong in this country, in their community, in their houses, in their jobs. It embodies the idea that accountability isn't just for leaders, but for every citizen. Tanya Stevens reminds us of corruption in high and low places only to remind us that because we have a colonial mentality, we see only the oppression that is above us and not the oppression that is among us. Creating a culture of silence in the face of patent wrongdoing is not just acceptable, it is dangerous and it is destructive. And speaking up respectfully and, more importantly, speaking truth becomes a civic duty of every citizen of this country and everyone who chooses to want to live among us, even though not a citizen. This applies, my friends, to whether we're talking about what happens in our home, our workplace, the church, the community, or even the block, especially the block. There is nothing to be gained through remaining silent when we know better. And to say I shoulda, I coulda, I didn't. Regret cannot be the platform to this country's stability, harmony, or prosperity.
Wagwan, my Jamaican family, and once again welcome back to the Yadi Reacts. If it is for the first time you are checking me out, kindly subscribe, like and share to my YouTube channel. And to my returning subscribers, I do want to say thank you very much for the love and support you are always giving on to me. Whereby today, guys, we're diving on to this video as it is a speech made by the PM of Barbados, Mayor Mottley, and to hereby it seems like she is exposing, you know, the corrupt leaders in the Caribbean countries and in Jamaica. So I want you guys to watch this entire video to the end and I'll be back with more.
Barbados, Jamaica, Grenada and Dominica took action to ban South African goods in solidarity with the people of South Africa. Recognizing that though they were thousands of miles away, there was an injustice being perpetrated, man's inhumanity to man, that required people who had little power to take a stand and to say wrong is wrong. And their efforts were soon followed months later in April of 1960 in our sister island in Trinidad and Tobago, where the dock workers of Trinidad refused to take the cargo from South Africa off the ships in April of 1960 and refused to refuel the ship that had brought the cargo, recognizing that even though they were dock workers and not capable of great and grave decisions, they could do what they could within the space that they could. And their work was to be followed then, of course, by that titan of Caribbean revolution and social reform, Fidel Castro, El Comandante, who worked then with that other great Caribbean titan, Michael Manley of Jamaica, well known perhaps to many of you. And of course our own father of independence, Errol Walton Barrow, who worked with Fidel Castro in the struggle for the liberation of the peoples of Southern Africa by allowing the planes that left Havana, Cuba, to refuel in Bridgetown, Barbados, in order to bring the troops into Southern Africa, and in particular Southwestern Africa. And then, of course, there was the decision of the Commonwealth heads of government. And I remember as a young law student in London, caught up in the fervor of the anti-apartheid movement and caught up in the passion of wanting to see your own imagery on television, because in those days you just didn't. And when we saw the students of South Africa week after week rise up to take their future into their own hands, it placed the pressure on leaders like Margaret Thatcher and others such that by the time the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting went to Nassau, Bahamas, a determination was made to establish the Eminent Persons Group. And in that Eminent Persons Group, co-chaired by Malcolm Fraser of Australia and Chief Obasanjo of Nigeria, it also included a woman who was to become the first Governor General of Barbados, Dame Nita Barrow, who came here as one of the 7 persons to determine whether there could be a platform for talks and for release in order to ensure that the ungodly and unconscionable actions of apartheid could be brought to an end. Regrettably, their work was to be stymied by the then government, but they were capable and able at the time to meet Madiba. And it is instructive what they wrote in their unanimous report about Madiba in 1986, and I quote, "Having visited him on 3 occasions, what was their assessment? That he impressed us as an outstandingly able and sincere person whose quality of leadership were self-evident. We found him unmarked by any trace of bitterness, despite his long imprisonment. His overriding concern was for the welfare of all races in South Africa in a just society. He longed to be allowed to contribute to the process of reconciliation." This was not post-release. This was not on the eve of release. This was still deep in the bowels of his imprisonment. And you know, I've deliberately decided to take a segue this afternoon before addressing the fundamental issues, because it is important that we contextualize the struggle and the values for those who refuse to be reminded, or who fail to be reminded, or who are not reminded, may well believe that this was as easy as dealing with the twinkle of an eye with the remediation and reparation of an awful thing. It hurt me to hear that there are some who believe that Madiba did not do enough, and perhaps worse for a few, that he might have been a sellout, all because what they believe, justifiably so, should be theirs today is not yet theirs. I've deliberately started this conversation this evening by carrying you back to the 1950s and stopping in the 1980s and stopping again in the 1990s. Because if there is any one single truth, it is that each of us runs our leg of the relay. And the baton is all that can be required of us to carry. And yesterday I had the distinct honor of going to the Foundation's headquarters in the Center of Memory, and of reading, and I feel so privileged to be given copies of the transcript in Madiba's own handwriting, and I shall treasure them as long as I have breath. But in reading his own assessment of where he was and what he believed had happened, in what was to become the beginning of chapter 1 of the presidential years. It was ironic that he started with the words, "Men and women all over the world, right down the centuries, come and go." Men and women all over the world, right down the centuries, come and go. What is more significant for me is that as he ended that first chapter, he also reflected on the fact that he sought at no stage for the fame that was to follow him, and that the notion that he could be regarded as a saint was one that he thoroughly rejected. And the last words, "I never was one even on the basis of an earthly definition of a saint as a sinner who keeps trying." My friends, we need to pause sometimes and to remember context always. And I do so because in a very real sense, that which I've come to address you today on too is the subject of a great struggle, and will be the subject of a struggle that will require many different people to run their different legs of the baton, of the race, to hand over the baton. And the example of Madiba is the example more than any other that I would want us to hold on to, because in so doing, it is the values that he exhibited, the moral example, the moral compass that he provides, that gives us both the strength and the capacity to run this race, which will be the greatest race that humanity will require of any generation. It stands out for me that at the very outset, courage was never lacking. It is a cause for which I am prepared to fight, but a cause for which I am prepared to die. How many of us can say that today? It was the moral fortitude of a man that determined that no type of offer with special conditionalities for early freedom would be acceptable, because what was required was justice. It is amazing that in the face of the gravest and greatest inhumanity, not just to himself, to his family, to his people, that the vengeance that would otherwise eat and force others into action was absent from his mind, body, and spirit. And as I just read to you from the evidence of the Eminent Persons Group, not conveniently so as an act of politics, but as an act of character, deep in the bosom of his imprisonment. And then there's the story that was told to me yesterday by Cello, as we looked at the photographs of what his cell contained. And I well recall my own visit to Robben Island 20 years ago. And all who, like me, have practiced a little criminal law in my career know that that is a common sight in colonial constructed prisons that had no sanitary facilities. And the humility of the man captured best in being able to ensure that when one of his own brothers was unable to take care of themselves in the most basic and human of ways, that Madiba performed the duties of cleaning for him. An example of servant leadership, if ever there is one. So forgive me if I have strayed a bit, because I believe that in this world where everything is instantaneous and quick, and where people expect results like that, we sometimes need to remind ourselves of the context of the struggles that we fight, and to remind ourselves of what truly was at stake. There are some young people who would simply now, 3 decades after his release, will only know of Nelson Mandela in the context of a history book or in the stories told by others, but would not appreciate what it is to be prevented from being able to love who you want, to work where you want, to live where you want, to do what you want, in ways that are simply not capable of contemplation today. But we can't talk about economic justice and economic opportunity if the basic aspects of freedom have not been guaranteed. No one expects us to be stuck in a moment of time, but it is the understanding that he did what was his to do. It is now up to us to do what is ours to do. And it is for that reason I've come to KwaZulu-Natal. You know, we live in a world that is at a very strange moment in time. It's been described recently as a polycrisis, and it has been so described because as soon as you get accustomed to managing one crisis, you've been hit with another one and another one and another one. And that is what it has felt like in the last few years. This country already knows what it is to lose people to the ravages of a public health crisis, as you did with HIV and AIDS for so long. Then to have to face, like the rest of us, the awful pandemic of COVID-19, taking away so many. All of us know people who have died in the last few years. None of us dreamt of a moment when our movement would be restricted such that we couldn't do the things that we wanted to do. And this was not being imposed on us by authoritarian governments. This was being imposed by public health specialists for the safety and survival of all of us. And as if that were not enough, because we were already fighting the climate crisis, we were still recovering from the financial crisis of 2008-9. As if all of that was not enough, then comes the awful scourge of the cancer of inflation, the cancer of the cost of living. And believe you me, it is a cancer, because you keep trying to run after it and run after it, but you can't catch up with it in that way. And we have now to come to understand that as much as we needed to mobilize to fight against vaccine inequity, that we were not a one-issue country or a one-issue people, that we literally had to fight these multiple crises, because as all of this is happening, people were still dying from the climate crisis. I don't talk about climate change. Change happened a long time ago. Crisis is where we are, and crisis is what we have to fight. And today, I want us to recognize that what is required of us is going to have to allow us to one, develop partnerships in places where we may never have dreamt of so doing before, and to be able to do things in new ways that we had never thought of doing, and that the actions required are not simply those of others, but of us, because it is the collective action that has led the world to be where it is today. There is no doubt that those primarily responsible for the increase in greenhouse gas emissions are the G20 countries, for whom 80% of the responsibility is there. Within that context, the traditional colonial powers who benefited from the Industrial Revolution through our blood, our sweat, and our tears, have been the ones who have effectively put the world in this position of warming. Theirs is the stock of gases. But then there are those who continue today, for which there are many of us. No name, no blame, because it's all of us. And it is the combined effect of the stock primarily, but yes, the flow today, that continues to cause the problems. I want us to reflect on the principles of justice and solidarity.
Welcome back, guys. I hope you've watched this entire video to the end and you have heard whatever the PM of Barbados, Mottley, had to say onto this speech. And whereby, for me, I just want to give her the praises and the full credits, mainly because she is a great leader, a leader that I have been following up, and I have just, did my revision about her, and I have known her since she is a great leader, a leader whom cares about the people of her country, and she works for the people, a leader whom usually encourages other leaders from African countries and the Caribbean countries like Jamaica to come around together so as they can create something concrete within them, urging African leaders and Caribbean leaders to stop being puppets to the West country leaders, urging them to stop corruption, so as things can go smoothly. Let's work for the people. Let's do what we promised the people we are going to do for them, is what this lady usually vies for, and these are the great leaders that each and every country usually wants. We don't want leaders whereby when we are giving them the chance to lead the country, they will therefore come around and, begin doing other things away from the promises they made to us. We don't want leaders whom just have got sweet tongues that can convince us, but later on they end up failing us. We want leaders whom work for the people, whom protect their people, and whom work for the country same way. Just like me, Mottley. You'll never come around, certain viral videos going around of barbarians coming around and saying that, or rather complaining about their prime minister. But when we go to Jamaica, a Caribbean country, and this is one of the most known countries in the Caribbean, or rather island in the Caribbean, a country that has gained global influence over the entire world. It's a country whereby you'll find out their citizens are the one whom are complaining about their leaders. Not only their leaders, but their prime minister, whom is Andrew Holness, each and every time. And this is something that it usually hurts my heart when I see citizens coming around and crying because their leader is oppressing them. We can talk about my country. My country, we have cried about our leader. We have cried about our president. A lot has happened onto my country. And it's so sad when I see us, having these kind of leaders whom doesn't care about us, leaders whom only care about themselves and how they're going to fill their pockets, and when they are out of the government, their pockets will be fat. They will have taken, things from us, or rather taken our resources. All they want is benefit themselves instead of coming up with conclusions and decision on how they are going to make the country a better country, and how they're going to, sustain the people of the country. These are the kind of leaders we want, not leaders whom only think about themselves, selfish leaders. We don't want corrupt leaders. This is something that is making, our countries look bad, like corruption system. And for our leaders being puppets to the West leaders definitely gives the West countries more power to rule us. We might say we are independent, but in other case, our leaders are the ones whom are returning us to the colonial system, mainly because they are being controlled by the West leaders. Yeah, if you are a leader of a country and you cannot make the decision for your country until you follow the decisions from other leaders from the West countries, like the West countries are controlling even your country, instead of you as a leader to do so, you are being controlled so as you can control your country. That doesn't make any kind of sense. And that's the main reasons to why our country usually are controlled with debts, not only from China, even to the other states in the West countries. Yeah. But what if our leaders come around together, join hands as African leaders and Caribbean leaders? Don't you think we are going to go far? Didn't Ibrahim Traore try that and it worked out for him? Isn't Burkina Faso on a safe place after he cut ties with the West countries like France? France were dealing with the minerals from Burkina Faso until Ibrahim Traore took the seat of being the president, and he cut ties with France. And now Burkina Faso are the one who are managing their resources and their minerals. And that country is now counted as, a great country, or rather an emerging country that was categorized as the poorest country in Africa. But because of one great leader, he brought change. And this is what Jamaica needs. This is what Africa needs. And we are going to be on the safer side and on a safer place when our leaders stop corruption, stop being puppets to West country leaders, and join hands with other African leaders and Caribbean leaders. And definitely it means we as the citizens are supposed to find a great leaders by electing them. So when we go to elections, we need to choose wisely. Let's not just, go with the sweet words that we are being given and being promised. It will lead us to the wrong path, as we are right now. So guys, I need to know whatever you think about this amazing video. Let's come around, share our thoughts throughout the comment section so we can get to interact and know what you think, and mainly because your opinion does matters to us every day. Thank you very much guys for following up the video with me. I was your host, Yadi Reacts. If you haven't yet subscribe to my channel, kindly subscribe, like and share to my YouTube channel. And to my returning subscribers, I do want to say thank you very much for the love and support you are always giving unto me. Always remember to link me up through my next videos. All I do want to say is peace out there.